Welcome to today's Explainer. We're going to dive right in and completely break down the natural world, from its tiniest building blocks all the way up to its grandest systems. If you're a beginner to ecology, you are in the perfect place. By the end of this, you're going to see exactly how every single thing in the natural world is intricately, beautifully connected. To weave this web of life, we're going to step through 5 foundational levels. We'll start with 1, the grand marketplace of life. 2, populations, the beating heart. 3, communities and ecological succession. 4, ecosystems, the nature machines. And finally, 5, the breaks, limiting factors. Let's jump straight into section 1, the grand marketplace of life. So, at its core, ecology is the scientific study of how living things connect with each other and their surroundings. I want you to imagine a bustling marketplace. You've got vendors selling fruits, animals being herded around, people constantly interacting, buying and selling. Well, ecology is the study of that exact same dynamic exchange, just out in the natural world. It's this constant, unending web of transactions where resources are quite literally traded for survival. Now, to really grasp how this marketplace functions, we have to look at the 2 distinct categories of inventory at play here: biotic and abiotic factors. Biotic factors, those are your living organisms. We're talking plants, animals, right down to the microscopic bacteria in the soil. Abiotic factors, on the other hand, are the non-living surroundings: the temperature, the amount of water, the sunlight. The entire field of ecology essentially rests on understanding how these living, biotic factors negotiate and survive within the strict rules set by the non-living, abiotic factors. Which brings us to section 2, populations, the beating heart. Now, the definition of a population is highly specific for a very good reason. It isn't just any random group of animals. It's a group of individuals of the exact same species living in a particular area that are capable of interbreeding. So whether we're talking about microscopic bacteria in a tiny petri dish or vast herds of wildebeest thundering across the African savanna, populations are the beating heart of ecological systems. They're the base units that actually grow, shrink, and interact. And ecologists don't just do a simple head count to measure this heartbeat. They track 4 really specific attributes. Size is the obvious one, but they also look at density, like how crowded are they? Then there's dispersion. Are they clumped together around a single water source, or are they uniformly spaced out because they're fiercely territorial? And finally, growth rate. By tracking these 4 things, scientists can actually predict future trends, figure out how to manage endangered species, or even control rapid, destructive expansions of invasive ones. But that brings up a really vital question. It is incredibly rare for a single species to live in total isolation, right? They almost always have neighbors. So what actually happens when different populations are forced to share the exact same limited space and resources? Well, that leads us right into section 3, communities and ecological succession. A community basically takes that single population we just talked about and multiplies it. It's an assemblage of interacting populations of different species, all living in a particular area. But here's the thing. A community is absolutely not a static list of animals. It's a highly dynamic, constantly shifting system. It gets shaped every single day by how these different species compete with each other for limited resources, stuff like food, water, and light. Together, they form an incredibly vibrant tapestry of life. And every relationship within that community falls into a category of symbiosis, which just means close, long-term interactions. You've got mutualism, which is a total win-win. Think of bees pollinating flowers, where both parties get exactly what they need. Then you have commensalism, a win-neutral situation where one benefits and the other honestly doesn't care. And finally, parasitism, a win-lose, where one thrives by actively harming the other. Literally, every relationship in a community neatly aligns into one of these 3 dynamics. Now, communities don't just exist forever unchanged. They're built and sometimes rebuilt over time through a process called ecological succession. Primary succession is essentially nature starting on hard mode. It begins on bare, lifeless rock after something crazy like a volcanic eruption. This takes centuries because pioneer species, like lichens, have to literally break down the solid rock just to create the very first layer of soil. Secondary succession happens a whole lot faster. It occurs after a disturbance, like a forest fire, where the trees might be gone, but that crucial soil still remains, allowing grasses and weeds to rapidly kickstart the community all over again. To really make this concrete, let's trace how succession transforms an entire lake. It's a fascinating 4-step process. It starts at step 1, oligotrophic. Think deep, cold, clear water with very few nutrients. But over centuries, runoff adds nutrients, leading to step 2, mesotrophic, where plants start to grow. By step 3, eutrophic, the lake is shallow, packed with dense plants, and actually losing oxygen. Finally, in step 4, the basin completely fills with sediment and organic matter. What was once a deep water lake has literally transformed into a solid terrestrial forest or meadow. It is a breathtaking transformation, driven entirely by biology. Okay, so we thoroughly understand the living community now. But the true magic, the real engine of nature, only turns on when we combine these living communities with the physical, non-living world around them. How does that integration actually work? Let's break that down in section 4, ecosystems, the nature machines. An ecosystem takes the living community and completely fuses it with the physical environment, and it's defined by 2 fundamental rules. First, there's a one-way flow of energy, usually starting with sunlight and losing a bit of heat at every single step. Second, there's the continuous, unending cycling of physical nutrients. The crucial point here is that an ecosystem acts exactly like a bustling city's infrastructure. Every single organism has a specific job that keeps the nature machine running smoothly. You have your producers, like plants, acting as the power plants that capture raw solar energy. You've got the consumers, the animals, acting as the citizens moving that energy through the economy. And you absolutely must have the decomposers, the bacteria and fungi. They act as the city's cleanup crew, breaking down waste to return those essential nutrients right back to the producers. And why does this matter to us? Because when these nature machines operate efficiently, they output vital ecosystem services. Healthy ecosystems act as giant filters, giving us clean air and water. They are the sole source of our food and timber. Forests absorb carbon dioxide to regulate our global climate, and coastal reefs physically protect our shorelines from devastating storms. We desperately rely on these invisible services for our own physical and economic survival. But if nature is a machine, what keeps it from growing completely out of control? That brings us to section 5, the brakes, limiting factors. The truth is, nature rarely offers boundless abundance. Instead, populations eventually hit a ceiling, which ecologists call carrying capacity. This ceiling is determined by limiting factors. These are strict environmental conditions that restrict growth and distribution. They're essentially the physical and biological boundaries, the brakes, that stop an ecosystem from expanding infinitely. These brakes are divided into our 2 favorite categories, abiotic and biotic factors. On the non-living side, a plant might simply run out of physical space, or a lake might run out of dissolved oxygen. On the living side, a population might be kept in check by intense predation, fierce competition for food, or a sudden outbreak of disease. These factors coldly dictate exactly where and how well any given species can survive on this planet. To formalize this, ecologists rely on 2 really strict rules. First up is the law of the minimum. This states that your growth isn't determined by your total resources, but by the single resource in shortest supply. You could have perfect sunlight and endless water, but if your soil lacks nitrogen, you're just not going to grow. Second is the law of tolerance, which notes that all organisms have a specific comfort zone, like a certain temperature range. If you push an organism outside that range, it will perish, no matter how much food is available. It's a highly delicate balance. And that delicate balance brings us to our most sobering point. Human activities, whether it's rapid deforestation, urban sprawl, or severe pollution, frequently disrupt these complex webs. When we remove keystone species or drastically alter those abiotic factors, ecosystems literally collapse. By degrading these systems, we risk losing all those essential services we talked about, actively making our planet sicker and uninhabitable for us. We don't just hurt nature, we destroy our own life support system. Ecology proves beyond a shadow of a doubt that we are not separate from nature. We are merely one highly influential population operating right in the middle of it. The rules of the grand marketplace apply to us just as strictly as they do to any other species. This leaves us with a critical choice. Will we finally recognize our place and protect these incredibly intricate systems? Or will we continue to dismantle the very infrastructure keeping us alive? That is the ultimate question we have to answer. Thank you for joining me on this explainer, and as always, keep learning.